Let's check in now with Chris Livesay, who is there amid the communion. Chris, tell us what it's like to engage in what is an extraordinary spiritual logistical challenge.
It's indeed extraordinary for a variety of reasons, John. The Holy Communion is taking place just behind me. People are crowding to the front of these barriers in order to get access to the priests who are handing out the bread, as you mentioned before, which represents the body of Christ, and the wine, the blood of Christ, for Christ who was crucified, as Christians believe, on Good Friday, and then rose again on Easter, otherwise sometimes referred to as Resurrection Day. That was the day just last week that Pope Francis returned to this square and made his very first grand public appearance here since he was discharged from the hospital. So for these faithful now to participate in the Eucharist, the Holy Communion, as you might be able to see a priest just over my shoulder here, they're crowding to the front in order to get access to it. It has an extra layer of profundity, this being the last place that Pope Francis addressed the faithful, rode around in his popemobile on Easter Sunday. The last address he made was to say Happy Easter on that Resurrection Day, and now as the faithful participate in the Eucharist on his funeral. John.
Chris, I'll take it. Thank you. And as you mentioned, Chris, that open popemobile, we have just learned that it will be an open popemobile that carries the Holy Father's coffin to the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Of course, a pope has not been buried outside of the Vatican in more than 100 years. So this procession will follow this funeral mass where people all along the route, which is about 3 miles long, to the Basilica of St. Mary Major, which is the largest and oldest Marian church in all of Rome. People will be able to see him and catch one last glimpse of him in that open popemobile, because that was part of Pope Francis. He got rid of the glass walls. He said it's like a sardine can, right? That was part of his humor.
It is. That's really moving, Nora, that it's going to be the popemobile, because Pope Francis, when he moved around the square for a number of months, years, I think, John, the popemobile was protected by screens, and Pope Francis took those off. And he continued. I mean, often he would take little children into the popemobile to give them a ride. And so even in death, Pope Francis doesn't want walls. He wants to build bridges and welcome that open church, the field hospital, to the very end.
Delia Gallagher, you traveled so often with the Holy Father. How did you see that in the many countries that he visited?
Well, you know, Nora, I think one of the things that I wanted to say when we were looking at the crowds is that this is a Jubilee year. This is a year which happens once every 25 years or so in the Catholic Church. And so what you have are people and groups of Catholics that had already planned to come to Rome for this special occasion, right? And this weekend was supposed to be the canonization of a young Italian boy, and so it's the Jubilee of teenagers. And there are 100,000 teenagers who were coming for that purpose, and then, of course, are now also here joining in the funeral mass. So I think that's a lovely thing that happened and coincided with Pope Francis, because of course he had a wonderful way, getting back to your question, to speaking to young people, because when I even speak to people here in the square, they say his simplicity, his way of saying it. Even Cardinal Ray in his homily mentioned that way of communicating which used normal language, right? And that was really what resonates a lot with people around the world, Catholic and non, about Pope Francis.
It's a beautiful point, Delia, to remember that there are so many teens here. I've talked to a number of them who are on their own pilgrimage here. Let's take a moment for those who want to say a reflection before we rejoin our coverage and listen to this beautiful Sistine Chapel choir.